The life of Daniel. Daniel worked at a desk. He lived alone. Every day was the same. Wake up, go to work, eat dinner, watch TV, sleep. He was invisible, unremarkable. Until one day, everything changed. It was a Tuesday. Rain lashed against the windows. Daniel ate his cereal. He stared at the clock. He was late. Again. He rushed out, briefcase in hand. He didn't see the speeding car. He didn't see anything until it was too late. The screech of brakes pierced the air. A thud. Gasps. The sound of metal crunching against metal echoed through the street, sending shivers down the spines of onlookers. It was a scene of chaos and confusion, with people rushing to see what had happened. A crowd gathered. Daniel lay motionless on the pavement. His body was still, almost lifeless, as if time had stopped for him. People whispered among themselves, their faces etched with concern and fear. Some tried to call for help, while others simply stood there, frozen in shock. His briefcase lay open, papers scattered everywhere. Important documents, now meaningless, fluttered in the wind, a stark contrast to the stillness of Daniel's body. It was as if his entire life had been spilled out onto the pavement, exposed for all to see. Minutes felt like hours. Sirens wailed in the distance. The anticipation was unbearable, each second stretching into an eternity. The crowd's murmurs grew louder, a mix of hope and dread as they waited for the emergency services to arrive. Getting closer. The world blurred. Daniel's vision faded in and out, the sounds around him becoming muffled and distant. He could barely make out the flashing lights of the ambulance as it approached, a beacon of hope in his darkening world. Then, darkness. He woke up in a hospital bed. The sterile environment was a stark contrast to the chaos of the accident scene. He blinked, trying to piece together what had happened, his mind foggy and disoriented. White walls, the smell of antiseptic. The room was quiet, save for the beeping of medical machines. It was a place of healing, but also of uncertainty. Daniel's senses were overwhelmed by the unfamiliar surroundings, a throbbing pain in his head. A doctor smiled down at him. The pain was sharp, a constant reminder of the accident. The doctor's smile was meant to be reassuring, but it did little to ease Daniel's anxiety. "You're lucky to be alive," he said. "Minor concussion." The words were meant to be comforting, but they only added to Daniel's confusion. How had he survived? What had happened to him? The questions swirled in his mind unanswered. "You'll be fine." Daniel wasn't so sure. The doctor's words seemed hollow, a promise that felt impossible to keep. As he lay there, staring at the ceiling, he couldn't shake the feeling that his life had been irrevocably changed. The road to recovery seemed long and uncertain, and Daniel wasn't sure if he was ready to face it. He couldn't shake the feeling, the fear, the helplessness. He was lucky, yes, but what if it happened again? He became withdrawn, quiet. He avoided crowds. He walked with his head down. The world felt dangerous, unpredictable. One night he woke to a sound, a faint cry. "Help me." He sat up in bed, listening. His heart pounded in his chest. He tried to ignore it. It was probably nothing, just a dream. But the cry came again, more insistent, closer. He got out of bed and went to the window. He looked out at the street below, empty, except for a single car. Smoke billowed from its crushed hood. He hesitated. Fear gripped him. He should call for help. But what if he was too late? What if someone was trapped inside? He couldn't ignore it. He couldn't live with himself if something happened. He had to act. He had to be brave. He ran out of his apartment, down the stairs, into the street. The air was thick with smoke. He coughed. His eyes watered. But he didn't stop. He reached the car. The heat was intense. The flames roared. He could see a figure slumped over the steering wheel, trapped. Adrenaline surged through him. He didn't think, he just acted. He grabbed a rock and smashed the car window. Shards of glass flew everywhere. He reached inside. The heat was unbearable. He felt for a pulse, weak but there. He had to get them out. He pulled with all his might. The person was heavy, unconscious. He wouldn't give up. He pulled again and again. Finally, he got them free. He dragged them away from the burning car. He collapsed on the ground, gasping for air. He looked at the person he had saved, a young woman. Her face was pale, her chest rose and fell shallowly. Alive. He had done it. He had saved her. Sirens wailed in the distance. This time they were for him, for her. He had faced his fear, and he had won. Paramedics swarmed the scene. They took the young woman away on a stretcher. She regained consciousness briefly. Her eyes met his. A look of shock crossed her face. "It's you," she whispered. "You were driving the car that night." Daniel froze. His blood ran cold. He recognized her now. The pedestrian he had hit. The one he had left lying in the road. Guilt washed over him. It was a heavy, suffocating feeling that seemed to cling to his very soul. Every breath he took felt like a reminder of the mistakes he had made, the lives he had affected. He had tried to forget that night, tried to push it to the farthest corners of his mind, hoping it would fade away with time. But memories have a way of resurfacing, especially the ones you wish to forget. Tried to bury it deep inside. He thought if he could just ignore it, it would disappear. But the more he tried to suppress it, the stronger it became, gnawing at his conscience. But now it was all coming back. The screeching brakes, the thud, the sound echoed in his mind, a constant reminder of that fateful night. He could still hear the cries, the chaos, the overwhelming sense of dread, the fear in her eyes. It was a look that haunted him, a look that he could never forget. It was as if her eyes were pleading with him, asking why. Why did this have to happen? He thought he had moved on, thought he could leave it all behind and start anew. But the past has a way of catching up no matter how fast you run. Thought he had escaped unscathed. But deep down, he knew he hadn't. The scars were there, hidden beneath the surface, waiting to be acknowledged. But fate had a funny way of catching up with you. It doesn't matter how far you go or how well you hide, it always finds a way to remind you of your past. He had saved her life. In that moment, he had acted on instinct, not thinking about the consequences. But the weight of his actions bore down on him, a constant reminder of what could have been. But he had also almost taken it. The guilt of that realization was overwhelming. How could he live with himself knowing he had come so close to causing irreparable harm? He didn't deserve her gratitude. He deserved her anger, her hatred. He had been reckless. And the consequences of his actions were something he would have to live with for the rest of his life. The remorse was a constant companion, a reminder of the fragility of life and the weight of his choices. He visited her in the hospital. He confessed everything. He apologized. He didn't expect forgiveness. He didn't deserve it. But she surprised him. She listened to his every word, her eyes filled with a mixture of pain and understanding. He had rehearsed this moment countless times in his mind, but nothing could prepare him for the reality of it. The weight of his guilt was almost unbearable, but he knew he had to face it. He had to face her. She told him she had been afraid too. Afraid to face him. Afraid to confront the memories that haunted her. The fear had kept her awake at night, replaying the events over and over in her mind. She had built walls around her heart, trying to protect herself from the pain. But now, seeing him here, vulnerable and remorseful, she felt those walls begin to crumble. Afraid to confront what had happened, she forgave him. Her voice was soft but steady, carrying the weight of her emotions. She told him that holding on to the anger and pain had only hurt her more. Forgiving him was not just for him, but for her own healing. It was a step towards reclaiming her life, towards finding peace. And in that moment, he forgave himself. It was as if a heavy burden had been lifted from his shoulders. For so long, he had been trapped in a cycle of self-loathing and regret. But her forgiveness was a beacon of hope, a sign that maybe, just maybe, he could find a way to move forward. He realized that forgiving himself was the first step towards redemption. He had been given a second chance, a chance to make things right, a chance to prove that he was more than his mistakes. He knew it wouldn't be easy. The road to redemption was long and fraught with challenges, but he was determined to walk it, no matter how difficult it might be. A chance to redeem himself, to show that he had learned from his past, to demonstrate that he was capable of change. He vowed to take this opportunity seriously, to not let it slip through his fingers. He would work hard every single day to become a better person, a chance to be a better man. He reflected on his past actions, the choices that had led him to this point. He knew he couldn't change what had happened, but he could change how he responded to it. He could choose to be kind, to be compassionate, to be someone who others could rely on. He could choose to be the man he had always wanted to be, and he wouldn't waste it. This was his moment, his opportunity to start anew. He was filled with a sense of purpose, a determination to make the most of this second chance. He knew there would be setbacks, moments of doubt and fear, but he was ready to face them head on, to keep moving forward no matter what. He would honor her forgiveness. He would carry it with him, a reminder of the grace she had shown him. It was a precious gift, one that he would cherish and protect. He promised himself that he would never take it for granted, that he would live his life in a way that honored her and the forgiveness she had given him. He would honor his second chance. This was a new beginning, a fresh start. He was determined to make the most of it, to build a life that he could be proud of. He knew it wouldn't be easy, but he was ready for the challenge. He was ready to embrace this new chapter of his life with open arms. He would never forget the night of the accident. It was a turning point, a moment that had changed everything. The memories were still vivid, the pain still raw, but he knew that he couldn't let it define him. He had to find a way to move past it, to learn from it and grow, but he would no longer let it define him. He was more than his mistakes, more than the pain and regret. He was a man on a journey of redemption, a man determined to make things right. He would use his past as a lesson, a guide to help him navigate the future. He was no longer the man who ran away. He had faced his fears, confronted his past, and come out stronger on the other side. He was no longer running from his mistakes, but running towards a better future. He was ready to take on whatever challenges came his way with courage and determination. He was the man who ran towards danger. He was no longer afraid to face the consequences of his actions. He was ready to take responsibility, to make amends, to do whatever it took to make things right. He was a man of courage, a man of integrity, a man who was determined to make a difference, the man who saved a life. He had been given a second chance, and he was determined to use it to help others. He wanted to make a positive impact, to be a force for good in the world. He knew that his actions could make a difference, that he could be a source of hope and inspiration for others. The man who found redemption in the most unexpected of places. He had come to the hospital seeking forgiveness, but he had found so much more. He had found hope. He had found purpose. He had found a new beginning. And he was ready to embrace it, to make the most of this second chance, to live a life of redemption and grace.